kids nowadays have so many, there's so much for them to have to pay attention to and think about, and distractions and, video games and busy schedules, and just lifestyle is so hectic that it's become really difficult for kids to focus. And the reason that kids actually tend to be so, good at it, if you could say that, is because there's a huge component of it that's about being open and curious to what you find in the present moment.
Welcome to the Tilt Parenting Podcast, a podcast featuring interviews and conversations aimed at inspiring, informing, and supporting parents raising differently wired kids. I'm your host, Debbie Reber, and today's episode features a conversation with Kate Berger. Kate is a child and adolescent psychologist as well as a certified mindfulness instructor who specializes in working with expat and third culture kids. In the past few years, I've been reading more and more about mindfulness, and I'm really intrigued by what research is showing in terms of how children can benefit from using mindfulness tools in their everyday life, especially children who may be more prone to anxiety or maybe just are more intense in general. So on today's episode, I asked Kate to break down exactly what mindfulness is, what a mindfulness practice might look like for a child, and how we as parents can support our kids in tapping into some of these really useful techniques. To learn more about this podcast and Tilt, the revolution for parents raising differently wired kids, visit www.tiltparenting.com. Well, hi, Kate. It's so nice to have you on the show today. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm great. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. I'm really happy to be sharing you with people on the Tilt podcast. You and I have had a chance to work together a couple years ago. You were Asher's therapist during our first year living in the Netherlands. So at that time, he met with you individually, and you had also set up a really cool social skills group through your practice that he participated in. So just to share with listeners a little bit about your background, you have a BA in psychology from George Washington University and a master's degree in child and adolescent psychology from the University of Leiden, which is here in the Netherlands. And then you have a therapy practice called Expat Kids Club, which includes therapy for children, after school groups, consulting for businesses and families who are dealing with kind of life as an expat. And then you're also the co-creator of the Families in Global Transition affiliate in the Netherlands. So first of all, it sounds like you're very busy.
Yep. That's true.
So, can you tell us a little bit about the overall mission for your business and I'd love to just know the kinds of kids that you work with in general.
Yeah, sure. So, I really believe that relocation creates a wonderful opportunity for people in general. And so often families that are relocating with kids see only the difficulties or the big challenges ahead of them. And so part of the mission of the work that I do is to help families see that the opportunities that are created are really wonderful and terrific. In fact, kids who are exposed to a relocation transition and can kind of get through that and see the challenges in front of them as obstacles to overcome, that these kids can develop skills that can be applied as they go through life and on to, in the workforce and becoming leaders in society and things like this. And so if we can really help them develop that sort of mindset from a younger age, I really truly believe that we are creating a better future for the young people in our society, but really for all of us. So it's a huge part of what I do, and where the passion for what I do lies in that. I really think we, in the day-to-day interactions, can make a big difference long term.
I'm just curious, before we kind of dive into the topic of mindfulness, the kids that you work with, is it kind of a blend of neurotypical kids and differently wired kids?
Yeah, it really varies. A lot of the kids that I work with, it is because the families reach out to me because exactly, similar to your situation, to have sort of that piece, that touch point, like you said, the connection to support as they transition. Here in the Netherlands, the mental health care system is very different if you're coming from the States and moving here to the Netherlands. There are a lot of sort of differences that are challenging to navigate, and language complicates all of that. So many of the families that I work with, I am kind of providing that real transitional support, whether it's, continuing some sort of structure or program that they've been working with in their previous location, and then shifting that into the support network and system that's here. that's a big piece. And in addition, a lot of the kids that I see are struggling with this sort of sense of maybe lack of belonging to the environment that they've now been dropped into, trying to get their head around sort of who they are in the context of the environment that's changed. So sense of self, identity related issues, very typical.
I imagine just hearing you talk about that if a child is kind of predisposed to being more, maybe anxious or highly sensitive in some areas, that a relocation is going to trigger a lot of that for them.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, okay. So now I'm like already thinking about a whole other episode I want to do with you about this specific topic. But what I wanted to talk with you about today is specifically about your work with mindfulness. And I've known since I've known you that this is a big area of interest for you, and that you do workshop with kids on how to bring more mindfulness into their lives. So I guess to start that conversation, I feel like mindfulness is a concept that it's definitely getting more and more play in the media lately. More and more people are talking about it. But what exactly is mindfulness? Like, how would you describe it to someone who is kind of coming to this concept fresh, or it might be in the background, but they don't really have a true sense of what it means?
Right. Yeah. And I really appreciate that you acknowledge that it's become sort of more mainstream these days. Unfortunately, with that comes a lot of misconceptions. So it's fantastic to have this kind of opportunity to, straighten out some of those ideas. So when we talk about mindfulness in practice, what we're really looking at is sort of present moment awareness, paying attention on purpose to the present moment, what's happening right now. And we do this using various mind-body techniques. So things like meditation, breathing exercises, movement, even sometimes mindful eating. So anything that we can do to bring us back to what's happening right now.
And why? I mean, why do we want to be more mindful?
Yeah. So really, if you think about it, many of the sort of stress and difficulties that we experience in life have a lot to do with what's already happened in the past or what's going to happen in the future. And so, we get pulled with our thoughts, with our mind, we get pulled into those two directions. And then are not present for what's happening right now, and sort of miss the opportunity to really be able to respond to what's happening in the moment, versus, when we get caught up and pulled and sort of on autopilot reacting to what's happened or what we think might happen. So coming to the present moment is a powerful way to be able to cultivate awareness for what's happening, and then create this opportunity and sort of power to choose how to respond to whatever set of circumstances you're in.
Okay, that's great. I don't know if I've ever heard it described that way, but that makes absolute sense. Asher and I have our own, and I'll talk about it later, kind of fledgling mindfulness practice. And I know that it's good for us, but it's good to hear exactly why.
Yeah.
So, well, let's talk about children then. Why do you think mindfulness as a practice can be so effective in children? Because I think, is your work specifically focused on working with young people in this area?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm working only with children, and to some extent parents, incorporating them in mindfulness practice with their children. But definitely my emphasis is on working with children. And, I think, there are many reasons. But one of the things that we've discovered, and I say we because I feel sort of a part of this movement that's bringing mindfulness to sort of more mainstream, institutions and things like that. Kids nowadays have so many, there's so much for them to have to pay attention to and think about, and distractions and, video games and busy schedules, and just lifestyle is so hectic that it's become really difficult for kids to focus, to concentrate. We see this in kind of shifts in sort of looking at prevalence of ADHD and things like that. And mindfulness is really useful because what you're doing is training the mind, training the brain to come back to the present moment, to create this awareness for what's happening. And the reason that kids actually tend to be so, good at it, if you could say that, is because there's a huge component of it that's about being open and curious to what you find in the present moment. So this sort of curiosity, almost like a curious George for what's happening, if you know that children's story. And kids are a little bit better at at this open curiosity than we are as adults because it comes more naturally to them. If you think about, babies exploring the world for the first time, picking up a new food, or, feeling different textures of materials and things like this. This is that sort of curiosity that we're talking about, that we're trying to cultivate through mindfulness practice, that kids are doing inherently because all these experiences are new to them. And it's really neat because where I was kind of going with the attention and concentration, what we're seeing is that, there's a lot of research going on, neuroscience looking into children. There's definitely more with adults, but a little bit with children, looking at sort of implications and how mindfulness practice is useful for them in a school setting. So looking at sort of test scores and things like this, and how their ability to pay attention, to focus, to concentrate is actually seen as improving through exposure to mindfulness practice. So it's really exciting.
You mentioning that reminded me of an article I read, and perhaps you read it too, in The Atlantic from last summer. It was called When Mindfulness Meets the Classroom.
Yeah.
And I thought it was fascinating and really talked about the very tangible positive effects on kids when it was actually a part of their regular day in the classroom, on especially emotional regulation or their overall sense of, just happiness and positivity versus being especially anxious or... Yeah, so that's very cool. So it seems like, according to this article, it's starting to become more and more a part of, more schools are starting to play with it.
Yeah, it's so exciting because there's some really terrific programs that are kind of running this force towards having mindfulness be incorporated into mainstream curriculum. So you have, in the UK, there's the Mindfulness in Schools project. In the States, Mindful Schools, and many, many more that are trying to bring mindfulness into the classroom, even if it's a mindful moment, where kids are encouraged to practice mindful listening. So just observing what they hear. Or some of the schools that I've worked with are doing mindful lunches. So the kids are going into the cafeteria and mindfully eating their sandwich or whatever, or mindfully walking from the classroom to the gym class or things like that.
So when you say, you're making me think of this spa that I went to for when I celebrated my 40th birthday. My best friend and I went to the spa called Miraval in Arizona, which we heard about from Oprah. So we were very excited about this. But mindfulness was a big part of what they did there, or the philosophy behind the spa. So for like mindful eating, it was that idea of just eating and not reading while you're eating. Or if you're folding laundry, not feeling the need to catch up on Netflix while doing that. But is that what you were talking about when you're saying mindful eating at school or mindful walking and, among kids?
Yeah, exactly. Because we do all these things on autopilot, right? I mean, the sort of classic example is, who were you in the shower with this morning, right? Mm-hmm. Very often not experiencing the water hitting the body and all these things. And, coming to the present moment is a useful skill to develop concentration and this ability to respond rather than react. But there's a wonderful sort of side effect piece of it that's about really savoring the experiences as they're happening. So eating our food and savoring and enjoying the taste of it, right? Taking a walk and feeling what that's like on the feet, to hit the ground, and feeling the sun on your face and all these kinds of things. So, it is wonderful in how mindfulness practice also, people who practice are developing this sort of appreciation and gratitude and happiness, increased happiness, which is fabulous.
Yeah, I'm thinking of a time when Asher was quite young, probably maybe 2 or 3, and I had picked him up from preschool and I took him to Green Lake, and we, with some snacks, and this is in Seattle, we walked out to the end of a dock and we kind of, decided, okay, for the next few minutes, let's just see everything we can hear. And then we did the same thing with everything we could see and everything we could smell. And I guess that in some ways that's the same thing. But it seems more natural to do when you have a child who's just discovering the world. And then as we get older, those things start to be less interesting, or maybe Minecraft is more interesting.
Right.
But yeah, so I guess kind of continuing that kind of practice too.
Yeah, absolutely. And we get the question all the time, like, am I doing mindfulness right, or am I doing it wrong? And it's there's no right or wrong way to do it. Just like you said, if going out and seeing whatever you can see and hearing whatever you can hear, that's being mindful, right? That's being present. So, but it's a hard thing if people haven't experienced that. It's a hard thing to explain, of course. So it's an important thing to keep in mind.
So let's talk about differently wired kids. And I think I know your answer, but I want to hear more. Like, why is it, or how can mindfulness be especially or particularly helpful for kids who might be, anxious or, super intense or highly sensitive or really inflexible, kind of the traits that we see in kids that have ADHD or Asperger's or sensory integration disorder? Why, are there reasons why it's especially useful for that population?
Yeah, it's really interesting and exciting because this is a direction that the mindfulness practice and intervention is definitely taking. I've recently done a training specifically on working with teens with ADHD and or autism diagnoses, that using mindfulness interventions with this population. And it's really neat because many reasons. One of the things that I think is really important to mention and that I'm most excited about is, these kids often are getting feedback from the environment that something's wrong with them. And that, they're not good enough, can't sort of be like the rest of their peer group and these kinds of things. And so the mindfulness practice, helping kids to understand, to develop awareness for the mind and the body in situations, and developing this sort of curiosity and compassion for what's happening with their mind and their body. And so, through that, one of the most exciting things is about the confidence that develops with that, the empathy for the self, right? So rather than sort of, feeling really different and horrible and isolated, actually feeling okay with who you are and understanding what you might need in a situation to be able to move forward. So that self-empathy, that compassion for the self is a big piece that I really love. And, with that, of course, bigger picture is, if you have young people, individuals who are able to be compassionate for themselves and take care of themselves, you can think about kind of what they bring into the environment that they're in, how they interact with other people, what their relationships are like, right? And if we have these connections between them and the rest of us, the kind of ripple effects of that energy, that compassion is really, really exciting.
Yeah, that's interesting. I love what you said, especially about the teenhood piece, because I think, teenhood is a difficult time for any child and, neurologically typical or atypical. And I think for kids who, may be aware of a diagnosis they have, who may feel really kind of good about who they are, once they hit adolescence and the hormones start to change and they may shift into a space where they want to be more like everyone else. So I could see it being especially useful for them to have that self-empathy at that stage. Really interesting. So I know that your program is based on the curriculum developed by the Mindfulness in Schools project in the UK. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the one I'm using nowadays. Yeah.
So can you kind of paint a picture for us of what, a program with kids might actually look like? Like, what is, when you do an after school group course, what does your work look like with them?
So it's an 8-week program, and the kids are coming once a week, and we kind of just start with the beginning of what we call playing attention. So understanding that we can use our attention, we can shift our awareness in different ways. We have the power to do that, and we do that through really fun activities. We use a flashlight, we use talk about animals, bring that into the exercises, and then throughout the course it's really having kids sort of check in on what they're paying attention to and developing that self-awareness for where they are in each moment. And, lots of, it's not, we don't typically with kids have them sit and meditate because that's really challenging. Some of them like to do it, and some of them do it. I've seen, 5 and 6-year-olds sit for 10 minutes, which is amazing. But so any kind of activity that's helping them to build that awareness. So we do movement, walking. We do sometimes some different kinds of like yoga movements. We do one of the classes is just about using mindful eating, and we use a chili pepper and chocolate, which is really interesting. And right away when you say that to the kids, or when they discover that this is what the object is that they are being encouraged to eat, noticing the immediate thoughts that come with that, or the aversions, right, or the excitement about it. And so the course is really fun and exciting and really engaging. There's videos, there's worksheets, there's take-home practice, and it's a big. This is a big sort of concept, a lifelong process of being mindful, being present. And so the course is really just about introducing that language to kids, and then for them to go off and apply that in any way that works for them.
Oh, it sounds very cool.
Yeah, it's so fun to teach. Yeah.
Well, it sounds also from what you're describing that it's not necessary to have this kind of formal mindfulness practice that you sit quietly for. I mean, some kids may want to do that, but that it doesn't have to look that way for kids to start incorporating mindfulness into their lives.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. And I should say, a big piece about one of the things that we find is that kids who are most successful in taking on these ideas and applying them in their lives are the kids whose parents are also practicing or have the intention to incorporate this in their day-to-day life. So we really encourage parents to get involved and either do the exercises with their kids at home, or do their own sort of adaptation, or even take a course themselves that's just for adults or for parents, because that seems to be the way that kids are going to continue with their own practice, is if their parents are modeling this at home.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that was my question. How can parents support the development of this? So I'm just thinking, like, practically, that might be just being like visible thinking, like talking out loud about what's going on. Like, I'm really enjoying the taste of this right now. Or, I mean, is it that simple?
Yeah, in some ways, yeah, it's really modeling your own awareness in moments, right? And I think the most powerful ones are the ones where, and maybe this is more opinion or just from my experience, but the moments where parents lose it or get frustrated, or
But that doesn't happen with me. But can you describe what you mean? Yeah.
But for that, for that to be a moment when you say, "Oh my gosh, I'm feeling really frustrated. I notice my heart is racing. I've got knots in my belly. My fists are clenching, and I'm thinking about, I'm wondering, I'm asking myself why, or what did I do wrong, or right, any of these kinds of things." And to be able to model that, and then to say, okay, what do I want to do with this? What do I think I need, right? And including your kids in that too can be really neat.
That's great. Yeah, and I find I'm just reflecting on how especially in our first year here, I was trying to, because my son was so unhappy that we, as he described, destroyed his life by picking up and leaving the home that he knew and the city and friends that he knew. I spent a lot of time when we were having good days, magical moments of lying in a hammock and having popsicles and just trying to really soak in every moment of that, both for my own personal well-being, so I could have that to counter the more difficult times, but also to kind of help him start to appreciate things in the moment too, and recognize it's not all hard or it's not all bad, or we have this full range of experiences.
Mm-hmm. Right, and it's challenging. I mean, especially in a transition like you've described. It's stressful. There's this inherent stress in relocation. There's no question about it. And parents, any of us, I mean, in the work that I'm doing, we want to be supportive. We want to help. We want to bring, all the tools that we have and share them with children. And to be able to do that, it really has to come from a place of knowing where you are in each and every moment, right? It's looking in the mirror or putting your own oxygen mask on first, and that sort of idea. mindful of where you are and what you're bringing into those interactions. So in that sense, parents who are practicing mindfulness, working on their own, cultivating their own practice, it can be so, so powerful and wonderful.
So any kind of favorite tips or resources that you can share with parents who are listening who want to learn more? I don't know if there are certain websites or, even something they could try maybe even today to kind of get started. Any tips to share?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. So one of my favorite books that I've been using lately is called Sitting Still Like a Frog, and it's by Elena Snell, a Dutch woman. She's actually written it in Dutch originally. It's been translated, but it's fantastic. It's got a CD. There's exercises on it, and I really just like the way it's kind of presented and packaged. In terms of research and information, the Mindfulness in Schools Project website has a ton of stuff up there about their efforts and what they've been doing, or again, Mindful Schools. For people in the U.S., there's the Mind Up Foundation that Goldie Hawn is a big spokeswoman for. So, there's lots of information available. Those are just sort of a few that I usually turn to or would recommend people turn to. And in terms of practice, one of the first exercises that we start with children typically is mindful listening. So maybe setting, a timer on the phone for 30 seconds, or if you've got one of those Tibetan singing bowls, that's the one that we use in practice. But, just you don't even need a timer if that's too much to think about. Just taking a few moments to just sit and listen. So anything that you hear, observing anything you hear in the room that you're in or outside of the room, maybe even any sounds coming from within the body. And just noticing that. And then maybe noticing also the sort of immediate urge to want to label those sounds or any emotions that are attached, that annoying truck that keeps driving by, or gosh, I'm really hungry, my stomach's grumbling, things like that. So just noticing the sounds and catching the thoughts that come in and just coming back to noticing the sounds.
I'm using the app right now called Headspace. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, love Headspace.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I've been trying to learn how to meditate since the beginning of the year, and he starts every meditation with that piece of just listening, and that is really interesting. It shifts things very quickly. Again, even as you said, I think 30 seconds is enough to realize there's a lot going on that we're tuning out, and it's really cool. That's a great tip. Thank you.
Yeah, I love Headspace. And the mind it's the nature of the mind to wander. It's constantly wandering and usually jumping to the past or the future. So even when we take that moment to check in, it's like, whoa, I didn't know that was happening.
Yeah, very cool. Well, this has been super interesting. I am just fascinated by the idea of mindfulness. And I also feel like it's one of those things where just a little bit of effort can probably yield some substantial and immediate rewards.
Yeah.
Well, for listeners who want to learn more about Kate and Expat Kids Club, I will have links to Kate's site as well as all these resources that we talked about, the books and Headspace and things on the show notes. Or you can also check out our site. It's www.expatkidsclub.com. And I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been fascinating and great food for thought on not only how mindfulness can really benefit differently wired kids, and not to mention parents raising them, but also just how we can start weaving it into our everyday lives. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Tilt Parenting Podcast. I hope you got some good insights on the potential for mindfulness for our kids. For more information on all the podcast episodes, visit tiltparenting.com/podcast. To access the show notes for this episode with links to Kate's practice, as well as all the books, websites, and other resources we mentioned in our conversation, go to tiltparenting.com/session4. And if you liked this episode, I would be grateful if you could take a moment to visit iTunes and subscribe, as well as leave an honest review. We are brand new to the podcast world, and our goal is to make sure parents of differently wired kids can find us. Your reviews and podcast subscriptions are super helpful in working towards that goal. Lastly, for more information on Tilt, the revolution for parents raising differently wired kids, and to sign up to be a part of the community, visit www.tiltparenting.com.